Despite all the contractual obligations, the responsibility lies with the entity which is considered to be AI system provider. It applies to quite basically every company nowadays, because it's hard to imagine a company who wouldn't use AI for their daily work.
The law stops calling you the customer and starts calling you the manufacturer.
Honestly, it's not even clear. I think it will be much clearer as we go and new guidelines appear.
I mean, if it's not clear for you guys, it'll be almost impossible for everyone. So if you're a company in Chicago, so you have no office in Europe.
You don't have a choice.
When do you think the first real enforcement action is going to happen because of the EUA Act that will probably waken people up? On the 2nd of August this year, a law that most companies are convinced has nothing to do with them becomes enforceable across Europe. And then a few weeks out, Brussels blinked and moved the deadline in parts to 2027 and to 2028. The whole market exhaled. Here is a sentence that belongs on every board's table. The EU AI Act applies to you. Even if you have never built a model, never trained a system, and have never thought of yourself as an AI company for a single day of your working life. The bank running a model over loan applications, the retailer scoring its customers, the firm that bought a hiring tool off the shelf and just switched it on. A readiness report this year found that 78% of enterprises have done nothing meaningful about any of it, and 83% cannot even produce a list of the AI systems they are already running. And that delay everyone is leaning on, it is not law yet. As I record this, it is a handshake, not a statute. The argument I want to make today is that the exhale is the trap. My guest spends her working life inside it. I'm Armour. This is The Control Layer. Hi, Antonina, and welcome to The Control Layer. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor.
So before we spring the conversation of the episode onto everybody, let's give people a bit of background, a bit of a map through it. So let's talk about your background, what you and your team does at Star, and a bit of an insight about what your average week looks like when an enterprise calls you in.
Yeah. So my name is Antonina Burlachenko. I work at a company called Star in a role of head of regulatory consulting. So what I do, I lead a team of consultants who support companies with getting their regulated products to markets. What we do, we help them to define global regulatory strategy, how to prioritize markets, how to scope the boundaries of devices, products to ensure scalability and easier maintenance post-market. And we also support them with building different compliance systems such as quality management systems, information security, data privacy, AI management systems. And naturally, we also deal with multiple market regulatory requirements such as medical device regulations, Cyber Resilience Act, GDPR in Europe, and also AI Act. So that's my background.
So do you focus on advising your clients, or do you also audit and you sort of certify against the standards?
We are all of that. So it could be very limited, basically like an hourly consulting and support. But for some companies, we actually work with them day-to-day, hands-on as part of their team. For yet other companies, We support them with internal audits or assessing gap assessment to understand the level of compliance. We also work with investors sometimes when they need to assess basically the credibility of the company before investment. We also participate in these latest stages of the due diligence audits. So that's where I come from.
So let's start where most of my audience is probably sitting, certain that the EU AI Act isn't their problem. so, so if we walk into, so let's do a scenario. So let's walk into a company that's sure the AI Act is somebody else's problem. They say they only buy AI, they don't build it, and you tell them potentially they're already in scope. What's the one thing you point at that makes them realize that truth and, make the room go quiet?
So AI Act has, first of all, it introduces different roles. So a lot of people, for some reason, focus only on AI system providers role, but there is also a role of AI system deployer, where you also are responsible for certain aspects when you deploy AI systems. And then there is also a number of different rules which could make you actually a system provider if you are not careful with what you place on the market under your trademark. And then yet there is also this article about AI literacy, which obliges companies to ensure the so-called AI literacy and understanding of their employees, which use AI in their day-to-day work. So I would say it applies to quite basically every company nowadays, because it's hard to imagine a company who wouldn't use AI for their daily work.
So when you buy a tool off the shelf, I guess you kind of assume that whoever made it carries that risk, and then maybe you fine tune it on your own data. You might even go so far as putting your own brand on the front, and you point it at a job, and maybe it wasn't even sold for. So somewhere in there, quietly, the law stops calling you the customer and starts calling you the manufacturer. So can you walk me through how that happens, and sort of are there specific legal triggers that mark that?
It comes under an Article 25 of AI Act, basically AI value chain responsibilities. So when you, as a deployer of AI system, place the AI system under your own name or trademark, while this AI system is a high-risk AI system under the Act, you become automatically considered as AI system provider, no matter of agreements or contractual arrangements with any companies. That is one case. Another case is if you, as a deployer of, I mean, initially as a deployer of the AI system, which was not high-risk AI, but you basically somehow uptrain it or use it for high-risk AI purposes, you also can fall into this high-risk AI system provider category and being automatically under a strict set of regulatory requirements. And then if you modify the existing high-risk AI system and again place it on the market, then you end up in the same place, being a high-risk AI system provider. In case of any of these cases, then you have to cooperate with the original AI system provider to ensure that you get all the data to be compliant with the regulation.
So it's almost like you're driving a car, or driving a hire car, versus like making your own, re-engineering one. So if you re-engineer it, you own what happens next, which I guess is what it's referring to. So if I slap my own brand on it, I make any minor amendments to it, then I basically own
Yeah,
whatever happens going forwards, even if I only use it for my own purposes.
yeah. But we should also remember that in many of the regulations, it's all about the intended use. So when we speak about this most heavy scope of the regulation in AI Act, under AI Act, it's about high-risk AI use cases. So high risk AI use cases, I don't know if you want to go in that direction, but they come in two flavors and they act. One part is if your product is already regulated by one of the listed harmonization legislation in the European Union, and it incorporates AI as core technology or safety component with AI, then it is a high risk AI system. If it also has to go through a third-party conformity assessment to get to the market under the original legislation. So that's one part. Another part, like another second flavor of AI, high-risk AI and AI Act, is this Annex 3, which lists specific use cases that are considered high-risk AI.
What kind of use cases fall into that high risk bucket?
So there is a lot of them. There are biometric identification systems. There are any products which could be used for employment, used for purposes in the educational setup, for management of the critical infrastructure, for management of the essential services, access to the essential public and private services, law enforcement, and some others. But generally, they say that this is the initial list of use cases, and as we go, we might extend them with new high-risk AI use cases.
And it's obviously an EU wide law. So does that mean that it only applies to EU headquartered companies?
No. So similarly to any other regulation in Europe, the regulation is supposed to protect European citizens. So it applies to any company which deploys, not in terms of technical deployment, but rather kind of allows their products to be used in the European market. So if an AI product is being used in European market and it leverages AI and qualifies, for example, high risk use case, it shall be compliant.
Right. So if you're a UK headquartered company or a US headquartered company and you sell your product into the EU and it utilizes AI or is affecting use cases that are high risk, then you need to comply with this.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess, I assume the sentence you hear most when you go into some of these rooms is, we're not an AI company. This doesn't apply to us. So what's your honest reply when you hear that?
First of all, I strongly suggest them to educate themselves on the regulation itself, just to avoid any surprises. Because one of the surprises which I can easily imagine happening is that someone tunes some existing solution and deploys them in a high risk use case, assuming that it is not anything serious, but suddenly ending up in illegal problems and reputational damage. So I think the first most important thing is to just understand the scope of it and at least understand what is the boundary which you should not cross, just to be safe.
Interesting. So two words, I guess, that run underneath the whole law, and almost everyone gets wrong in some way round. So a provider builds a system or puts its name on it. A deployer uses it, I guess. So where's the line, and which side do most companies think they're on versus the side they're actually on?
The boundary is fairly understandable. Like if you develop an AI system and you basically place it in the market, you're a provider. If you use the system without any modification according to its intended use, you're a deployer. But if you are taking a ready system and somehow change it and place it on the market under your own name, then you also, are in a risk of ending up by being a provider of high risk AI system. So that's the case where companies should be kind of aware of this kind of fact and risk or possibility, and should take their decisions consciously.
So let's delve into that a little bit. So this is a good scenario. I'm in a company. I have bought, I don't know, Copilot or Claude, whatever, and I use it for my business. And because I use it for a core part of my business, that makes me productive and allows me to do something, bring something to market more easily. Does that make me only a deployer? Do I become a provider if I produce a product that I then sell that has AI in it? How
And
does that?
so it first of all, there is also currently we are speaking with you in a moment of time where there is additional complexity to AI Act because in the middle of May there was this suggestion of amendment to the regulation, which is not yet published in the official journal. It is expected to be published on the political level. It was kind of agreed, but it was not yet officially published. So with that said, your question is quite complex because it could be that you end up being in a position where you have shared responsibility with the initial provider of the Gen AI. In other cases, it could be that you end up by full-blown high-risk AI system. For example, if you have already now we have a couple of examples of medical devices leveraging Gen AI. So in that case, if the company leverages Gen AI for some medical indications, which is obviously initially not intended for that, they are responsible for the specific use case they are placing it on the market for. And yet in other cases, it could be that you will be still just a deployer. So it depends on how you use it, on the way you use it, or the how this if you use it within your organization or you place a product on the market which will be used by third parties, not within your organization. So I think currently with this current state of the definition of AI Act and the transition with amendments, honestly, it's not even clear. I think it will be much clearer as we go and new guidelines appear.
I mean, if it's not clear for you guys, it'll be almost impossible for everyone else. But so I guess if a company accepts it's a deployer and assumes that's the easy end of it because there aren't as many restrictions, is that true? What does someone in the building have to do every week that they're probably not doing now because of the AI Act?
Okay, so a role of the deployers comes with several different responsibilities. So first of all, when a deployer applies any product within the organization, they should make sure that they use it according to its instructions for use. And they should also implement some human oversight for the use of the system. They should make sure that all the people involved in the usage of AI systems are educated and this AI literacy is in place. Input data, which they put in that system, is aligned and sufficiently representative of the intended purpose of the system. And then on top of that, they are also responsible to monitor the operation of the system, collect the logs, and store those logs for 6 months or per relevant other applicable laws. And then they are supposed to inform provider, importer, or authorized representative about any serious incidents which occurred with the system. And then for specific types of AI systems, such as these post-remote biometric identification systems, there are additional requirements. So one of those is annual reporting of all the use of this system. So basically, they want to monitor how these kind of systems are being used by the deployers.
Interesting. So almost, how to describe it, an audit log of all the actions that were taken
Yeah.
by that AI system. Okay. And then those logs, they need to have at least 6 months worth of logs, or do they need a 12 months worth of logs, or it's a rolling?
So it's regulation says about 6 months or per other applicable laws. So I think it will be a little bit more complex question, and it will depend also on the type of data you store and which other regulatory regulations apply as well.
Mhm. So if a company signs a contract with its vendor that says, in black and white, that you carry the compliance risk. They file it, they relax. And for 2 of the 3 ways that you become a provider, that contract is worth nothing, right? And if
For,
that's true, how do you tell a CFO that the indemnity that they're so proud of doesn't do what they think?
for just as a correction, for all 3 cases, any contractual obligations are not important, because the
Ah,
regulation says that despite all the contractual obligations, the responsibility lies with the entity which is considered to be AI system provider.
interesting. So,
Yeah.
irrespective of what their contract said when they
Yeah.
signed it, they
Mhm.
will still be the one who are carrying the risk and
Yeah.
responsible. Interesting. So, wow, I think there's a lot of folks out there listening to this when it launches that would not have thought that, would not have realized that that is true. So, but let's play devil's advocate. Let's play the cynic. So, because someone watching it might be. So you're a star and you come from a consultancy. I guess you sell compliance and compliance assurance. So how does someone tell a real obligation from a firm who's trying to sell them something? So if you think, what can someone listening go and do today to check for themselves without having to call you to at least know that they carry a risk?
Okay, so that goes back to this. Like a couple of minutes ago, we spoke about what would be the first step I would recommend companies to do.
Hmm.
So I think the most important thing is for them to understand what is actually high risk AI system on the AI Act, to understand all those use cases, high risk AI use cases, because that is basically the core. If they understand what is the high risk AI use cases, they will at least know that when they will step in that territory.
So what I'm hearing is sort of 3 areas to be mindful of. 1, get clarity on what does the Act describe as high-risk use cases. Then 2, assess whether you are a provider or deployer, and then based on that, and then judge how much of that is a risk that you're taking on and how much is not. Okay, interesting. This episode is brought to you by Arcava. I'm Amir Altaf, the founder. The EU has confirmed it. Every high-risk AI system operating in the EU must be auditable, accountable, and reconstructable on demand by December 2027. That's 18 months, less if you count procurement. Arcava turns sovereign AI into outcomes your board can measure and builds them on a foundation regulators will recognize. UK built, auditable by default, engaged by the outcome. If you're standing up an AI program that has to be defensible by 2027, start now. Contact us at arcava.ai. I think you alluded to it earlier. There's some changings going on with the Act. So there's new news. So walk me through in a little bit more detail what Brussels actually did. I think the headline was the EU delays the AI Act, and Plenty, I guess, took that on as, well, we can stop now. So, but what really changed and what didn't it touch?
The core change is actually this pushing back the deadline. So, as we previously already discussed, there are two kinds of high risk AI systems. So, for these high risk AI systems that are listed in Annex 3 and that are specific use cases of using AI, the deadline now is December 2027. And then for all the high risk AI systems that are already regulated by other regulations, it is August 2028. So that is like the biggest change. Then another change which was introduced is that there is this article in the AI Act saying that for micro enterprises there will be a simplified rules for quality management system. In this proposal of an amendment, they say that they would like to extend it also to SMEs, so small, medium enterprise size companies. But I mean, this could mean nothing, if I am honest, because there is no yet guidelines on what the simplified QMS means. It is yet to be drafted. So this change could be either a big change and simplification for startups, or it could be barely noticeable. So we will see it
The
as we
devil
see
is in the
the.
detail.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yes, and then there are a little bit of other shuffles related to the timeline. So, for example, for there is this obligation, transparency obligation to mark any AI generated content, and initially it was by August 2026. And now they say if you place your product on the market before that date, then you have this grace transition period of 4 months. So it is December 2026.
Okay, interesting. So again, I guess a delay sounds like a gift to most companies, but if 70% had done nothing by the old deadline, I guess an extra year doesn't really help them very much if they're just going to do nothing for 11 months and then panic in the 12th month.
Yeah.
So is this really a reprieve, or is it just a longer run up to the same brick wall?
Yeah. I agree with you completely. So if someone is not doing anything, they will not do anything for the next 1 year as well. But my personal take is that the delay is not only because of the companies are not ready, it is also because the system is not ready to enforce the regulation and to even allow the conformity assessment and et cetera, et cetera. So notified bodies to be notified, AI sandboxes to be established and aligned, all the other roles, basically governance and monitoring framework to be established. So I would say that is the real cause of the delay.
This is clarify that. So the EU isn't ready for the law they put
Yeah.
in place.
Yeah, because it's complex. And we've seen how complex it was to introduce these medical device regulations, MDR, AVDR in Europe. It was very similar. We had previously old directive and we switched to regulation. It took years and years, and we finally soon to be there. It was kind of predictable, quite expected that AI Act will be also delayed because it requires a very complex system of governance and monitoring.
For the people who think they've got until 2027 or later, what's still binding on the 2nd of August, whatever happens with this new omnibus deal?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's assume that omnibus deal gets in. So in that case, we still have this AI literacy requirement. We have this prohibition of some AI practices. That is actually also an important aspect. We previously discussed what is important for organizations to know about AI in Europe. So they also definitely should know what is not allowed to be placed on European market. So all those prohibited practices. This omnibus is also introducing additional prohibited use case related to kind of modification and generation of the content with different nudity content, sexual content, and also children abuse, stuff like that. Yeah, so all of that. And then there is also a bunch of obligations related to transparency. So the ones which we already described. For those companies who are already high-risk AI systems and that are regulated by other legislations, from my experience at least, I see that notified bodies are already checking for compliance. So even so, for example, for medical devices, MDR, IVDR does not explicitly say about data governance or bias or some other or ML risks, but they speak about the fact that you have to take into account the technology of your product. So when notified body audits you, they look at it. So responsible companies are already, handling all those all those aspects anyway. So the biggest maybe difference in terms of AI Act rollout will be for those additional AI use cases, which are not yet regulated.
So do you think, as a sensible operator, how do you think they should behave, bearing in mind everything's still a little unsure, a little uncertain? Should they wait, or should they start years with what they know now?
So last couple of years of my life, I spent participating in endless webinars and podcasts and writing articles, stuff like that, trying to explain that, I mean, management systems is not only about compliance. It's not only for checkbox and CE mark on some product. It's also about like safety of the
Mm,
product for end
mm,
users. It's for your reputation as a company. It's for competitive edge. I don't know, sending a signal to the market that we are kind of a company who protects human rights and, I don't know, fairness and stuff like that.
mm.
So I think it's quite good reason to start. And I understand that, like, I mean, a lot of people say that small startups cannot, doesn't have money to invest in these management systems. But in many cases, it's also common sense. Like, you should introducing some kind of framework, the way how you do some procedures and then follow them. It does not introduce the additional cost, because
Mm,
working in a complete chaotic environment where you are not in control what's happening, in the end will end up in higher cost.
mm. So I think that that's a really valuable takeaway, because I think I take your point and I agree with you. If you're bringing a product into a market, it's good to set a signal that you are caring for the rights and for the well-being of ultimately for the customers that you're going to sell it to
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So you get these various differing of opinions. Do you feel with these changes and it being pushed back that actually that's the EU recognizing they weren't ready and they needed to delay it? Or do you think they were listening to some of these bigger companies that are saying, well, no, you need to water it down. You're restricting things too much.
That is a good question. So honestly, I do really think that European Union is just not fully ready to introduce the full AI Act enforcement due to some of the missing harmonized standards, common specifications, and guidelines. As a separate note, a lot of those changes which are introduced will end up in a benefit for SMEs and startups, so which probably don't have so huge leverage on the political level. And also my experience working with enterprises is that they are actually aware of AI Act, and many of them already implemented these AI management systems. So one of our services at Star, we delivered AI literacy training, basically about the technology itself, about the compliance, different kind of framework, regulation, stuff like that. And like we are delivering it for already a couple of years, and many enterprise companies are already behind all those kind of basic steps. Maybe I am naive, but still I somehow believe that AI Act, even if in its current form, is still the best AI regulation we have in the world. So I haven't seen better. So instead of judging Europe, maybe we should, also kind of acknowledge that it is complex. It's not easy to regulate the technology which is developing so rapidly.
I think I agree with you. I think there's at least they went and decided to take the brave step to do something. But I do think there is something about active engagement with the builder community to understand what the boundaries should be, and having a framework that can adapt more easily and flex more easily as time goes on, which I think the UK attempted with the UK Autonomous Vehicles Act. They engaged a lot with the AI community, with the car manufacturers, with legislators, with concerned bodies, to try and understand what is the boundaries of the technology the capabilities of it, and can they create a framework that allows innovation to thrive within it while allowing people clarity to say, well, this far and no further, which I really hope is the outcome that'll happen with the EU AI Act 2.
So
Yeah.
in theory, this concept of AI sandboxes is intended exactly for these purposes which you just listed. So in these AI sandboxes, they will allow, first of all, they will prioritize availability of those sandboxes will be prioritized for smaller companies, SMEs. And then they will allow for the regulators and the industry to work together and to basically play together in those playgrounds to together explore where is the boundary. Because the thing is that no one knows where is the boundary, and the boundary is also not static; it is all the time moving. So regulation won't be with so dynamically changing technology as AI and so drastically and fast developing so fast, it will be impossible to just establish regulation and forget about it. It will continuous collaboration and continuous monitoring and adjustment will be needed to still keep it reasonable.
I totally agree with you. It's a technology space that is moving faster than people's ability to comprehend. And I think that regulation needs to keep pace with that, which is not what regulation is known for.
Yeah, definitely not.
So, quick break. The control layer exists for one reason: to bring you the people actively shaping the world we'll all live in next. The architects, the operators, the decision makers whose calls you'll be living with 5 years from now. We publish their thinking every week on Substack, free. Every claim is sourced, every prediction goes on a tracker we revisit publicly when the test date comes up. If you want to be in the room when the future gets built, subscribe at link.arcava.ai/join. Now, back to the conversation. So I guess your background, you've got a lot of experience in quality systems and experience in deploying them. So what I'm trying to understand is it better to build the quality system from the beginning so you're capturing evidence as you go, or is it something that I think in my own experience people would tend to do, which is there's audit date and 3 months before, if they're lucky, they'll start capturing stuff and hope they can pass, right? So which when it comes to AI, is it the same or is it something different?
That is a good question. So
I can hear a lot of pain in your voice when you said that.
yeah. I mean, a little bit of a tale about the older times. So when we had like regulated products like hardware, there were alternative ways to certify them. You could establish the quality management system and then follow it as a process and control the production and everything. Or alternative way was to test actually the output product, to give a bunch of kind of sample products and test them that they conform to the established requirements. The problem with software, and I'm not even mentioning AI, is that those products are very complex. It is impossible to test them. Like when you have something which looks nice, which has a lot of buttons and a lot of outputs, it's impossible for you in the end to assess the quality of that. Therefore, all the regulators in the world at some point in the end of the previous century said that for software, we want you to follow a strict process predefined upfront because it will be like the likelihood of failure will be minimized if you follow a proper process and have some controls throughout that process in place. So therefore, creating some documents in retrospective, even for software, it's useless. And speaking of AI, like the life cycle, AI life cycle is completely different. A lot of decision making throughout the modeling, feature engineering process, and everything. Even if it was a good decision, if you don't document your kind of justification or reasons for that specific decision, it will all be forgotten. Even like, a simple example with bias control. Like when you say bias, many people would immediately only think about data. But bias could be actually stemming from many other places throughout the life cycle. Even in the very beginning, when you just come up with some specific business need or problem to solve, which later on is translated into ML task to be solved, already at that point you can introduce bias. In the moment of, I don't know, feature engineering and selection, like what we will use as an input for your prediction, algorithm which we will use, or I mean, every single step throughout the development of a system could introduce bias in it. So how can you document, control of that bias? Post factum, I have no idea. It's like the only way, if you want to do it, truly want to do it, not to somehow pretend and simulate, is to do it as you go.
Interesting. I don't know of any other capability on the market that will capture as it goes what an AI is thinking and doing and whatnot. So I think there's definitely a gap there for someone to figure out. But so if a team's building an AI feature in their company this quarter, what 2 or 3 things should they write down from week one that cost almost nothing today and are near impossible to recreate after they've launched it? So give the engineer on their commute something to do on Monday.
So first of all, I would strongly recommend them to establish proper data governance. So tracking the origin, like where this data comes from, what was the actions we took to clean it or prepare or whatever, how did we split the data, for example, if we train our own model, how we split the data into training, validation, testing. Because I've seen smart people, really educated, really talented people making very basic mistakes, which led, for example, to this data leak where your test data is basically is not fully independent from your training data because of the data split. How do you label your data? It's not, honestly, all the governance with software and AI in many cases is not about weird compliance practices. It's also about good engineering practices. My background is in engineering. I was automation in past. I work in cybersecurity, in quality assurance as well. So a lot of those requirements which come from the regulators are also good engineering practices, which you'll read in any quality assurance book. I've also met organizations, even small startups, where there was a young person, founder, who has some high risk medical device leveraging AI, and he's an engineer, like by his education. And he told me that he was surprised how easy it was to pass the audit for under medical device regulation. Even so, I know that they also check for all those good practices in AI. And for me, what it only says that that person is a good engineer, and when he implemented the system, he also followed good engineering practice. Because regulations, honestly, for me, it's not crazy things. It's also just good common sense.
It's not so compliance by design isn't a new philosophy. It's just good engineering practice.
Yeah. So regulators, as you said, as we spoke, you said at some point that there are some companies who have different values. And, so exactly for those companies, someone has to enforce them to leverage and use some good practices. But in a good company with a proper quality mindset, for them, it is, rather part of their culture.
So let's move on to some of the other standards that are out there. So, for example, ISO 42001, which is the AI management system standard. So is that so? All honest answer. So, is that real protection, or is it just a badge for the website?
You named two opposites, and as always in real life, answer is somewhere in between. So if someone tells you that any certification is a real protection, it's a complete lie. Because what can you do to be 100% sure that, incidents or some bad stuff will not happen? Nothing. Because it's, by definition, from the principles of even software, like bugs, it's impossible to ensure that there is no bugs. That's it. That's the core. But doesn't mean that we should not implement it. Of course not, because it's still like implementing some structure, some governance allows you to produce repeatable results, to be in control what happened, to have traceability and understanding, and also prediction of how what will be your output. So not even saying about the quality and users reputations and stuff like that. So I mean, I think that it is worth implementing it, while it is not a guarantee. And yes, it will be still useful kind of mark on your web page to brag about. And one note is that most likely ISO 42001 won't be harmonized on the AI Act. With that said, I still believe that it is very, very good standard, because it has this Annex B listing different examples of controls, which are very sensible and useful and could be a really good map to basically use as initial AI management system implementation, even if something will have to be added on top as part of the AI Act full compliance from the perspective of safety, still useful standard.
So it's a good place to start, potentially, as a place to look. Do you think it's better off to start there, or just go whole hog and look at the EU AI Act?
If you look at the article of AI Act describing quality management system, it is very high level. The person who does not have experience with these kind of systems will not find it very useful, honestly, because it just tells you high level things, what has to be done. While 4201 is actually giving you in this annex, it actually gives you very practical, basically kind of guidance, interpretation of different aspects, so that it can be easier to implement, basically.
So it's not either or, it's they actually complement each other. So let's widen the conversation out to potentially for listeners who aren't in Europe or in the UK and broader afield. So if you're a company in Chicago, so you have no office in Europe, so never thought about Brussels in your life, but it's AI product touches someone in, say, Germany, maybe a customer, an applicant. Just to confirm, are they still in scope? And also, to add to that, when does the US General Counsel realize a European law is now their problem?
If any company outside of European Union basically allows their product to be used within European Union, then and that product is qualified as high-risk AI system under the Act, then they will fall into the scope of the regulation. But honestly, that is also nothing new, because, for example, with medical devices, in the current regulations, MDR, IVDR, there is so-called remote sales devices, where if you are a manufacturer of a medical device which is deployed somewhere else, not in Europe, but you allow via some web user interface for the patient from Europe to access your system, you are immediately falling in the MDR, IVDR scope, and you have to comply, basically. So
you don't have a choice.
So yeah, you don't have a choice.
I guess the UK is also drifting on its own track slightly, kind of aligned, but not quite, to what the EU is doing. So if you're in a company who sits across, say, London, Dublin, or New York, you're kind of juggling more than one rule book for effectively the same product, the same system. So is the real cost being compliant in 3 places at once, or is it actually, and also then I guess the question for me would be, is anyone actually even resourced to be able to do that?
So dealing with patchwork of global regulations is never easy, first of all. With that said, it's not impossible. So like for some industries which are already regulated in many countries, it is a reality they deal with. So they have to somehow build a system, because like there is a lot of different markets globally, but you still, as a company, you're one company. You have, I mean, it is really beneficial to have one way of working, instead of having a QMS for Europe, QMS for United States, or something else, for some other country. So obviously, it depends on the size of your company and the amount of the people which work for you, because I can imagine that for some bigger companies, there could be like complete separation, different teams. One team is working on the specific QMS for Europe, another team in something else. But in the reality of smaller companies, I mean, the easiest way is to just implement the good practice way how we work, which is compliant with the regulations in Europe, for example, and just apply it across. Because even in the United States, there are some states which also introduce some AI regulations.
So you might as well comply to the strictest one, and then you'll be all right by all the others at least. So you've seen companies do this really well. Help paint me a picture and our audience a picture of. So if you've got the same size, same budget, same pressure, but you're calm about what's happening in August, and you're coming up to this idea of what's happening in 2027 and 2028. What do those good companies have that panic ones don't?
I have a lot of experience speaking with, companies in the very beginning, and I think I already trained my own model inside to predict how it will be to work with them. And so for me, honestly, the main difference is, which you can sense even within the first hour of speaking to a person, is the kind of quality mindset and the reasons which drive them. So I've seen really small companies with really limited resources who were driven to bring value to their patients or users, or, to the quality, dedication to quality and stuff like that. So in that case, when you work with this kind of people, you can introduce very simple first step, and then, go next and next and next until you end up with fully compliant system. That is one reality. Another reality is a company with quite a lot of resources, but completely different values, which consider this compliance more like a check mark to receive. So that is the biggest challenge. Therefore, my ideal company, I think, is the company which took the first step. So if you at least started doing something which takes you in the right direction, you will get eventually there.
So do you think it's about the commitment within the organization, the leadership
Yeah.
to to lead on quality rather than lead on I guess profit?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
interesting. With your prediction hat on, when do you think the first real enforcement action is going to happen because of the EUA Act that will probably waken people up and tell them, get them to realize they need to do something? Do you think it's going to be against a company nobody expected? Or do you think it's going to be someone that we already know?
I mean, it could be, I think it could be, it will happen somewhere 2028.
Hmm.
And I mean, it could be a use case, for example, when a company, for example, European-based company, deploys some solution, uses this for high-risk purposes, and steps into, for example, high-risk AI system provider role without knowing it, and ends up in the problems. So that's my prediction.
Very good. Well done. That's very good. But I mean, as a delve into it, do you think it's likely to be a European company that's going to fall foul of it? Or do you think it's likely to be a non-European, a foreign company that's going to fall foul?
It could be also foreign, maybe even more likely, because they may be less aware about the European realities.
This is the fun part. So, so you're in a time machine. You're in the DeLorean in Back to the Future. You've gone back in time. You've gone back to August 2024, which was the days before the act became law. So what's the one thing you'd tell yourself about what was coming?
That's honestly quite difficult question. Difficult because when it was already published, I mean, I've already been monitoring AI way before that, so I kind of knew about it, and also when it was published, the world was already more or less, it was clear what will happen. But I would say if that machine took me maybe when AI Act was drafted, not published, in the very beginning when it was drafted, I would basically explain the information which I would convey, it would not relate to AI Act itself, changes and stuff like that. It was more or less expected. I would rather make it clear for myself how fast the technology will actually evolve. Because even so, I expected that it is going to happen. Like the pace is still kind of quite impressive.
So would you have told yourself, the thing that you would tell that person back then, what would you tell them to watch out for or to do differently?
Honestly, I think as a company, we did everything quite well because first of all, we knew about AI Act way before it was published. We started conducting different webinars and podcasts to basically educate people about it. We also basically developed offering for compliance way before it was started, and training and all of that. So all that part, I don't think anything would change. Besides, I would just make it very clear for myself that how fast it will develop as all the Gen AI and the capabilities, because there is a lot of opportunities in the technology itself, even in compliance areas.
Fantastic, thank you. I was going to say thank you very much, Antonina, for your time on the podcast. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for all the good questions.
That's Antonina Burlachenko, Head of Quality and Regulatory Consulting at STAR. The episode is The EU AI Act Applies to You, even if you don't build AI. If you want anything with AI inside it, and you're not certain which side of that line you're on, well, that's not a comfortable place to leave it. And it's a reason to go and check on Monday. Every episode of this show ends with a prediction we write down and come back to. Subscribe, and you'll be here when we find out whether Antonina was right. I'm Armour, and this is The Control Layer.